Welcome to our Season 1 review of Deep Space Nine. I am Ben.
I'm Dan.
And we're here to talk to you about a show that aired, what were we saying? It's 27 years ago now.
This
is when the first season aired, 1992.
93, I thought.
Did it debut 93?
January 93.
Okay, yeah. We've done a sort of combination review of the pilot, Emissary, and Season 1 of Picard, because we started watching Deep Space Nine when we were about halfway through Season 1 of Picard.
Really through the lens of comparing the writing between the two.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So after that, we started watching Season 1 of Deep Space Nine. And, I had watched it a little bit in my childhood. I had seen the pilot. I had seen that episode where Sisko, Kira, Dax, and I think Bashir are all trapped in the game.
Yes.
Double your winnings, double your fate.
Double their peril, double your winnings.
Alamarain!
Alamarain! Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great episode. So I'd seen a couple of those, but I had not seen it as an adult, right? So.
Yeah, it really seems like a show that having a little more perspective, you're able to appreciate it a lot more.
It's definitely made more for a mature audience than The Next Generation or the original series. It's still, I would say, mostly family friendly. Even though, interestingly enough, Netflix puts violence is understandable, but nudity, gore.
They just slap every possible.
Yeah, they haven't even looked.
Rated G, nudity, sex,
gore, death.
Yeah, mature content.
Which is funny, but it is a bit of a darker tone than The Next Generation or the original series. Which I really enjoyed because it's still, it's easy to feel like Star Trek because it's a contemporary show of The Next Generation, and it has the production aesthetic of The Next Generation in a lot of ways. They're sharing the same crew. It's literally shot in the next building. But despite all of that, it feels like a departure within the universe that works really well, because it's darker and it has these points of view that are sort of antithetical to the Federation or suspicious of the Federation. So
I don't believe the Federation has any business being here.
I wonder how much naturally comes from just being in a single location on a station orbiting Bajor to kind of a darker tone, because in the original series and The Next Generation, you might have some really, maybe dark or horrible things happen to some people at a distant planet or star system, and then the Enterprise kind of, at the end of the day, flies off to the next adventure. Whatever problems are at Bajor or on Deep Space Nine
directly
are going to remain there, right?
Yeah.
So I think naturally you're just going to have more, reality kind of in the
this day-to-day
in the day-to-day exactly.
plots and the you're going to have more sort of the consequences of each episode, and you see this even early on, even though it's largely episodic early on, but the consequences of different actions have ripple effects.
Right.
Because you have Kira and the Bajorans, you have their interests, and just such a deep dive on their culture that I really love.
Right. Very early on in the season, we start seeing the first signs of the Circle, and they continue playing a larger and larger role as the series kind of goes on. But, this is something we wouldn't really see on board of a solitary ship traveling around. This is, these are, I don't know how you'd want to qualify them as a terrorist group or just a new government trying to take over the previous, because I guess that's kind of how you define government versus terrorist group, is just who wins in the end.
Right. There are different factions, and there are different levels of sort of fanaticism and radicalism, and it's such a spectacular look on that. You have the episode where it's, I think, the season finale, right, where the school gets bombed because it's sort of a very, very complex plot to lure out one of the potential next Kais, and it's a very complex plot, but it involves Keiko O'Brien's school being bombed, and it's a very real feeling sort of thing. I wonder if it had at all to do. I don't think the World Trade Center bombings happened
Not
yet.
for another 9 or 8.
Well, I'm talking about the garage bombings.
Like the car bombs.
Car bombs in the.
That's right.
I think that was 92 or 93, so it might have happened then. I wonder how close of an allegory that was, or if it was maybe some other global event, or just maybe
And
not.
the whole episode just really ties down into a kind of a constant debate. Maybe we don't hear about it as much, but just a natural, you can see the parallels arguing evolution versus creationism in school, and how big of an issue that for a long time has been in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Science versus religion.
Commander Sisko encountered the entities who created the wormhole when he went...
Excuse me. By entities, do you not mean the prophets?
Yes, on Bajor, the entities are worshipped as prophets.
Who teaches what topics can be off limits or not. Keiko takes a stand that it's her school. She's not going to ignore teaching the students about something that she believes to be very important for where they are and understanding, the science of the wormhole.
It's wonderfully complex too, because while I think we're naturally inclined to be on the side of Keiko in that episode, in the name of science, in the name of sort of an objective teaching of everything. Here's a society that has just recently been liberated from Cardassian oppression, right? And there's a decent argument that, they should get to decide what they want to teach. And then obviously that's completely complicated by the school bombing,
but
in a very real way.
It really does raise a really, really great moral issue. You've got a teacher that's not from Bajor teaching the students. We know the religion on Bajor is really important to their culture, and it plays a huge role in every aspect of their society.
Right.
It's kind of the thing that's even holding them together at this moment in their history. So at the beginning, Sisko is making the argument that there is room for all beliefs and all ways of looking at the world, but it really does get really messy when you throw in the subterfuge and the plots of bombings and
Chief O'Brien's, sort of sleeper agent. I don't know if that's what you would call her, but her. That's a great arc. I love O'Brien's growth as a character in this show. His kind of handyman who can solve, sort of handyman MacGyver persona who can solve any issue. I love it when he kicks the console, and I think the first episode.
Oh yes, the
Remember
percussive maintenance.
Yes.
No stranger to the Trek universe.
No. And his sort of the exploration of his character, and also his relationship with the Cardassian computer. That's a great staple of, I think, some of the older Star Trek shows are these interactions with the computers.
The opposing force grew in direct proportion to the power output of the Enterprise.
So it kept us from forming a subspace field for the warp drive.
That is correct.
On the Enterprise.
It's got a whole personality. It's like a whole other character.
Yeah, and this one has a sort of different new personality that O'Brien has to deal with.
Warning, subspace field collapse in 60 seconds.
Computer, transfer energy from the inertial dampers to reinforce the subspace field.
Procedure is not recommended.
Damn it, transfer the energy.
Unable to comply. Level 1 safety protocols have canceled request.
Cancelled?
Warning, subspace field collapse in 30 seconds.
So I for one, really, really enjoyed the first season. And what I've read, at least online, is that, like a lot of other Star Trek shows, the first season or two are sort of considered not as high quality, maybe
as the rest, so it only gets better.
So I'm really looking forward to where it goes.
Yeah, there are definitely a few episodes that in it that are maybe a little more forgettable than others, but there is always that challenge of a first season where you've got to lay the groundwork of who are these people, what is the world that they're living in. We're set up very nicely. We get a little bit of exposition on, or a little bit of a teaser on Otto getting a little closer to finding out where he's from, and if there's other beings like him in the episode, where that one guy has a thing that is like him.
Yeah, the necklace that he has, that's a little key. Yeah, that one thing. That's a great episode. Especially, there are a lot of characters in Star Trek where they're searching for their identity, searching for their origin. But I love how they change the sort of shading of that exploration. You have Spock, who is Vulcan, and it's not quite established right away in the original series, the relationship that Vulcans have to humans. So there's that episode. There's the episode of the original series where they encounter the Romulans, and then you have that sort of racial tension.
No one had ever seen Romulans before.
Keep going.
Cryptography is working on it, sir.
Give it to Spock.
Didn't quite get that, Mr. Sound.
Nothing, sir.
Repeat it.
I was suggesting that Mr. Spock could probably translate it for you, sir.
I assume you're complimenting Mr. Spock on his ability to decode.
I'm not sure, sir.
Well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge.
He's exploring his humanity and his Vulcan ancestry.
Great,
and then you have
the Galileo 7, that's a big episode for learning more about Spock and the emotionalistness of the Vulcans.
Yeah, and then you have Data in The Next Generation, who is searching for his own identity through the lens of becoming more human. And then in Deep Space Nine, you have Otto, who is searching for just who he is in general.
I was found in the Denorius Belt. I don't know where I came from. No idea if there are any others like me.
And he's modeled himself after a humanoid form just to sort of fit in, right? And you can tell that he's sort of out of place. I love the actor Rene Ajubardine.
Ajubardine.
Is that how you say it?
I have no idea. Ajur Jones?
I'm here with Mr. Otto himself. How's it going today?
It's going pretty well. Do you know my name?
Yes, Mr. Rene Auberjonas.
Auberjonois.
Auberjonois. I apologize.
No.
Rene Ajubardine. Yes. I love the way...
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, yes. But I love the way that he plays that character. Such a fascinating dynamic. And, he has a great relationship with Kira and a great rapport with Quark on screen, which is wonderful to watch.
I won't have you come in here harassing my customers. Order a drink, play the tables, or vacate the premises. Rom, bring a flask of my special Angora.
Yeah, they have a fun banter back and forth that really builds over the season, and I'm sure the rest of the show. Yeah, no, funnily enough, before I ever watched The Next Generation, I was actually kind of turned off by the idea of Data, not knowing what the character was even all about, because my initial reaction was that they're just doing a Spock ripoff, where it's just another emotionless character trying to... What's ironic is in the end, Data is actually coming from the complete opposite end of Spock.
Yeah.
Where Spock is not trying to find his humanity. He's trying to, maybe he's trying to find himself in where he fits in as a half Vulcan, half.
He's trying to repress his
human.
humanity.
He's trying to repress his humanity for most of the show, whereas Data's trying to come on the other end.
Otto is a new angle on that whole thing,
whole new.
Right?
Yeah, on the outside, he looks very humanoid, but he's completely different physiology. I don't know.
One thing that I think is interesting is that he has to go back to his pail.
Every 16 hours, or what was it?
Yeah, every
8 hours?
16 or 17 hours. He has to go in his pail for a couple hours. And the only thought I have is, well, for being the chief of security, that's a bit of an interesting vulnerability. I hope they explore that maybe a little bit later.
Well, I mean, there is that in episode he gets trapped on the lift with Luoxana.
There is. That's a good episode. Is it like the Apple? Is it like the Apple Magic Mouse where you put yourself in a pail for 2 minutes and it's like, well, then you get like 45 minutes of being able to become a solid form. So it's not like he has to go in for 5 hours absolutely at a time.
It's just
he can be called in the middle of the night, and it's like, well, then he's charged enough that he can retain his form for a
while
amount of
before having
time.
to come back. Maybe. I could see that.
Yeah.
It actually depends on how upgraded his bucket is. Higher class buckets get him faster recharges.
I can see that.
Yeah.
It's made by Apple.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we need to devote a good amount of time, though, talking about the greatest character ever developed in the history of television.
Who is this, Dan?
The Grand Nagus. The Grand Nagus.
Yeah. We're going to leave all of that in, I think. The Grand Nagus.
My compliments, Quark. These tube grubs are chilled to perfection. Did I say I was finished? Boy! It was a test to see if you were ready to take my place, and you failed miserably! Quark!
Played by that guy that was in The Princess Bride.
Mm-hmm.
First, let's drink. Me from my glass, and you from yours.
You don't grab power, you accumulate it quietly without anyone noticing. But I don't understand. The bar, you fool, that was the key. All those visitors.
Fucking gold that character is.
I don't even know what I could say. Just makes the whole season.
Well, didn't you say like the first line of dialogue that he said in his episode, which I think is just called the Nagus, his first line of dialogue, you were just instantly on board.
Oh, the second he opened his mouth, the second you hear his voice, it is just, I fucking love this character.
I want to sample one of your hollow sweets. Quark!
It is just,
yeah.
It is just the epitome of Ferengi, you know.
Old. I love how his skin is kind of flaky.
He actually has the separate earlobes, kind of. He's so old that his ears dangle.
You have like cellulite on his ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. His episode is wonderful. Quark in general is just
any Quark episode is awesome.
Fucking great. I love when Luoxana meets him in her episode and calls him a troll.
You are dealing with the daughter of the fifth house holder of the sacred chalice of Reeks, heir to the holy rings of Beta Zed.
Up my ear, please!
Yes, and I know where it hurts the most, you little troll.
You know, anytime. Oh, when he gets branded. I kind of wish...
Is it gonna leave a scar?
I kind of wish that could have just left a scar a little bit. That would have been
very
unfortunate for his character. Yeah, very
just
unfortunate.
Gets branded. Oh my god. Yeah, and that's again the circle.
Yeah, anytime he hisses. It's great. Nog is a wonderful character. I love Nog and Jake Sisko. I mean, they really do a good job on the whole show of just making it feel like this community, this station that's, present at this sort of at the frontier. They managed to make it a show about a space station that doesn't go anywhere. That's a lot different than The Next Generation or the original series that came before it. Doesn't go anywhere, but still manages to be on the absolute forefront of the Federation and of exploration.
Well, I'm actually really surprised watching through this how much they are not necessarily using the wormhole hole as a crutch either. Because as soon as that gets introduced, you start thinking, well, maybe that's just going to be every episode, something different's going to come through the wormhole, and that's how they're going to deal with it. They're not really traveling through space, but space is coming to them. But it's really not. There have been some things, and them going on to the other end and finding things over there. But there's been a good mix of just character episodes on the space station, plenty of things going on Bajor, the dynamics of what's going on in their government on the ground. And the wormhole just adds another element, but it's not necessarily just the wormhole show. And let's tune in this week to see what comes out of the wormhole.
I'm actually surprised how little we see ships flying through the wormhole.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of cool inside the wormhole. It's a very 90s looking sequence.
Oh yeah, you gotta love that early CGI.
Very, very early CGI.
Yeah. But of course, then they'd have to, either reuse the same footage or make spend all that production time making more of it. So
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, they had, I guess the first season had 19 episodes in it, but most of the seasons have had 26, like other Trek's typical old network television season lengths, it would seem like.
That's another thing in comparison to just maybe more modern Star Trek.
Yes.
Is just that they're putting out a lot more episodes in a year, and the quality is pretty consistent.
It's pretty surprisingly good. Yeah, I think, I wonder how that sort of affects, our perception of the show, because you have 26 episodes, you have a lot more time for those character moments.
Right.
And they don't quite have those character moments, I think, as often or at the same slow pace as they do in old Trek, in new Trek, if that makes sense. Everything just has to move at a breakneck speed because they have 10 episodes, they have 15 episodes, 14, however many they had in Discovery. So, I mean, obviously, 26 episodes, that's production moving at a breakneck speed. You've got to cut a lot of corners, I get that. But it's so surprising that the writing is still, it's really good.
It's top notch.
It's top notch, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good show. I do have a couple notes though that I want to go over. So one thing I have written down is that there is a weird sexual energy to season 1 of this show that I've picked up on that I can't quite put my finger on. It's not that bad, but it's something that I've just kind of noticed through several scenes. So it's just sort of the tone at the end of some of the scenes. And I think the best way that I could describe it is it just doesn't maybe hold up. It doesn't stand the test of time as well as the rest of the show. One scene in particular that I'm talking about is, so the scene where Julian and Dax are having dinner in the promenade, and then Julian asks if he can walk her back to her quarters.
I really should be getting to bed.
Well, may I escort you to your quarters?
That's not necessary, Julian.
Oh. Well, good night then.
And she says, "No, I'm fine. I don't need you to do that." And she gets up and leaves, and then he's kind of sitting there all bummed, and he has this moment where he goes, "Doesn't need."
Not necessary, Julian. But not forbidden either.
And then he just stands up and just follows her back to her quarters. And then it ends up being a good thing that he did because she almost gets abducted, because that's the episode that's written by D.C. Fontana, interestingly enough, I believe, right?
That's right, yeah.
So that is an interesting thing of note.
Right,
but
if he hadn't been there to try and save her, it would have been bad.
Yeah, I think the only thing about it is, I do like in the scene there's a turn where he's going to save her.
Dax!
I'm thinking, oh, please don't let him actually save her by kind of following her weirdly like this. But he doesn't. He gets his ass kicked, which is very nice. But I guess I was maybe kind of hoping for a scene where she accosts him, even though he sort of helped save her in that moment. That still wasn't okay that he followed her. That would have been, I think, a very Trek thing to do.
Right. I think this is an artifact of the 90s.
That's what
and
I'm
where
saying,
the show
yeah.
really feels kind of dated, because there is that just overall sexual kind of tone in most movies and shows for some reason that I guess came out of that era and eras before.
Right.
Which is really interesting, just watching culture kind of shift. But watching it from today's viewpoint, it really does leave you feeling pretty uncomfortable. Because
There are some scenes, yeah. Well, it's interesting because I don't remember TNG having as many of these sort of dated scenes. I kind of get the impression it's maybe one writer on the staff in season 1. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know that it's DC Fontana necessarily. That was just one example. Another example I have is Nog and Jake. They're pretty innocent in their quests to just hang out with girls and spend time with girls on the station. But there's one scene that's a bit cringy. Is when him and Nog meet the Bajoran leader who's their age.
What are you doing? My name's Jog.
And she kind of takes a shine to Jake a little bit.
He's Nog, I'm Jake Sisko.
Even though Nog gets a little jealous, which is awesome. I do anything with Jake and Nog. They have a great dynamic. But there's one point at the end of the episode where something that Nog told her early on allows her to sort of resolve the conflict, and she gives him a little kiss. Maybe not as big of a deal now talking about it as I had watching it, but I thought it was a bit cringy because he's coming off as sort of a little bit clingy in the episode and a little bit, I don't know, awkward. Right. The last example I have is when the Dax double appears at the behest of Julian's imagination. And that in and of itself is a funny premise. I really like the fact that she's very clinging to him in front of everyone else. And I really liked how real Dax kind of calls him out a little bit on... She has this scene where she goes, anyone's imagination shouldn't be the business of everyone else, as long as it's just, your imagination and all that. And then there's a moment and she goes, I don't know why she has to be so submissive, though. But then fake Dax appears, and kind of objects to that and sort of calls real Dax a cold fish.
Is that how you want me to be, Julian? So submissive? I am not submissive. Am I? I'm just not the cold fish. You are. Cold fish?
Now, I never said that.
If you'd get down off your high horse, you'd start to appreciate Julian.
She has a sense of humor, as I've always imagined you do.
I could use one about now.
But the way that the scene sort of goes, the tone at the end that you have is sort of that real Dax kind of got told a little bit, or like, yeah, good point.
She was being a little bit of a prude.
Yeah. At least that was what I took from it.
You do kind of wonder how that was meant to be written.
Yeah. The tone, I had trouble kind of interpreting the tone of that scene a little bit.
One of the things that I really noticed that I find very strange and makes the show feel maybe dated or weird or just odd is just how many overdubs there are throughout the whole season, especially on Bashir. But on a lot of different characters, and a lot of the overdubs are just so obvious and not very good. It reminds me of even old episodes of The Twilight Zone. Just most shows, I don't know, at like the early 60s, late 50s, they just decided that all children should just be dubbed over all the time.
Well, I probably have an answer to that. It's probably because children actors fucking suck.
Makes sense.
Speak correctly.
Not good at talking.
Yes.
But it that's what it reminded me of. I'm thinking to myself, why is Bashir dubbed over and like almost all of his lines? What happened here? It's so strange.
I'll tell you one thing that I found unusual about his voice was anytime he had to try to sound commanding or threatening. There's the one episode, I forget which one it's called, but there's the one episode where he gets sort of possessed by that. I don't know if possessed is the right word, but he gets overtaken by that bandit, right? And then he becomes, this sort of murderous bandit that's on the loose, on the run, really hard to catch, who I believe faked his death earlier in the episode.
Or he killed his body, but it transferred his consciousness into an implant or something that then gets injected into Julian.
Exactly. And when he gets possessed, his voice lowers a lot, but it sounds almost comical because he's trying to sound really threatening, and he's like raise the shields.
Shields up.
Done.
Secure the rest of the ship.
And it doesn't sound threatening at all.
It just sounds like he's put on a funny voice.
Yeah, I think I hate to say it, I think he's maybe one of the weaker actors so far.
I don't know.
There's that episode.
That's in the episode we were talking about earlier, where they're
in the pyramid.
Game.
They're in the pyramid, and Cisco hears some yelling and
Doctor.
Even at the end, Cisco's like, if you want us to find you, just fucking yell again, you fucking weirdo.
Just
my God.
Cry out.
And if all else fails, just yell again, Doctor. We'll find you.
We'll find you.
Yeah. He's a horn dog.
Yeah.
Which is all right, but he's a bit of a creeper. Ooh, one scene that was super cringe that I wanted to talk about is when his double sort of, I guess, kind of dies or disappears. I think one of the classic Star Trek explodey panels gets her, and she gets injured, and Bashir is on the ground with his imagination Dax. And then she disappears, and he looks all sad. Meanwhile, real Dax is 15 feet away solving the problems of the episode. It seemed that was one episode, or one scene where I was just like, ooh.
I think what makes up for it all is that in an episode mainly surrounding Miles is the character of Rumpelstiltskin. For a big chunk of the episode.
That's the same episode.
That just feels so classic Trek.
That's the same episode.
That is the same episode. Well, that makes up
You're
for
a
it.
sleepy boy.
Yeah.
I think Julian Bashir, the actor who plays Julian Bashir, may be one of the weaker performances on the show. Terry Farrell, I mentioned this to you. I think her performance has improved over the season. In Emissary, I was sort of not impressed with her character as much, but she's grown on me a lot over the season, I think.
Now you wonder how long it might just take to find the voice of a character and what they might look like as the show progresses.
Yeah.
Get a very fun little Q episode.
Yeah, the Q episode is he's a bit weirder. Oh, I think I could add this to my list of episodes. He's a bit weirder with Vosh than usual.
He is very wanting to be very controlling over Vosh.
I'm back. And I can see now it was cruel of me to leave you.
Very touching, but you didn't leave me, I left you.
You left me, I left you. Details, mere details. The important thing is we're back together again, a team. Joined together at the hip.
It's very interesting. But I mean, Q has in the past, I don't know, can have some weird personality quirks.
His character did always border on fun, lovable scamp and absolute psychopath.
Yeah.
But they lean a little heavy into the absolute psychopath
on this one. Although as much
when
as
he's turning her into like an old lady at the very end, and she's like, I don't know if it's at the end, but he's turning her into an old lady because she's like, I don't need your help anymore. All right.
Although as a standalone episode, while I really liked it, in context of the whole season, it does feel a little maybe unnecessary in a way. Mm-hmm. Like it's a great episode, it's fun, but it is two characters mainly for the whole episode that we really don't see beyond just a single episode.
That is true. It's two TNG characters.
Yeah.
And Miles O'Brien.
And Miles, but he's one of the little people.
Oh, yes. Weren't you one of the little people?
That episode, I think, I could have maybe done without that one a bit. Or if they could have toned down the whole weirdness, weird ambiguity of Q and Vash.
Yeah.
Who are two characters from TNG, so it feels very much, sort of shoehorned.
Like a little leftover from the Next Generation or something.
Yeah. But,
although, not to say I wouldn't like to see more Q. But.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, John Delancey steals the show every time he's on the screen.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the first season. I can't wait to continue watching, especially as the Dominion War develops.
I'm very curious. I've heard so much about this. I really have no idea what it entails. So I'm excited to see.
I've seen bits and pieces, when I was younger or just over the years, right? But yeah, it's a breath of fresh air, I think, so to speak. To we aren't the total Star Trek. I've seen Next Generation multiple times. I've seen the original series. You've seen Next Generation, the original series. We've both seen all the movies. But it's nice to actually have some newer Star Trek to watch that's from the 90s and not quite the same vein as sort of what we're getting now.
Yeah.
So we're very lucky to do that. So.
Yeah, and we have the advantage of also being able to watch it from today. Like in a way is maybe even better in some aspects of watching it now than
you can binge
watching it at the time it was coming out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm interested to see how the show changes once Michael Piller is not as involved as a writer.
Yeah, when does that happen? Is that later in
season 2 or 3? I think.
Oh, really? So still.
Yeah, because he left to go work on Voyager.
Right.
And so I'm interested to see that, and the sort of Ronald Moore becoming more involved. I think will be interesting to see how that progresses with the show. So definitely some good stuff. I think. Probably most people have seen it by now who like Star Trek if you haven't. But if you have not watched Deep Space Nine and you're not as big a fan of Star Trek The Picard or The Discovery, I would recommend checking it out because it's darker, yes, and it's different from The Next Generation, yes. Those are both things that New Trek has strived, I guess, to really
try and do.
And this does it in a very successful, subtle, contemplative way, I think. So
yeah,
give
it a watch or a rewatch
or a triple rewatch. I think next time we'll be back with something other than Star Trek. We love Star Trek, so it's made the most sense for us to talk about. But you're reading Dune right now. We have the new Dune movie coming out later.
Yes.
I think we're gonna check out the first Dune movie and maybe talk about that.
Kyle MacLachlan.
Yep.
David Lynch.
Mm-hmm. Maybe talk about some old Twilight Zone. I don't know. It is funny though, picking a good time to start doing reviews at a time when there are no new movies out.
we got a whole lot of movies.
Yeah, I guess what we probably should do is Tiger King.
I'm standing on principle
of
not to watch this. It just invaded every aspect of my life in a single moment.
Have you seen it though?
Well, no, I was watching.
You gotta see
I was
it.
watching something else on Netflix, and then it starts auto playing at the end, and I'm like, "Well, that's kind of weird. That doesn't usually happen."
Yeah, but
and
it's
then
crazy.
I pop on the internet, and everyone's talking about it. Like a text from someone's like, "Hey, have you watched this Tiger show?"
Dan.
And I'm like,
Watch
"What?
Tiger King.
What is going on here?"
Watch it.
So I'm gonna be out of the loop.
Watch it so we can talk about it to people.
I have to think about it.
Okay. Well, think it over. All right, that's it.